If we were to put a Pop Warner team, let's just call it a fifth grade team, up against an NFL team, what would that look like? Hey, welcome to LUSO, a show about our great country and really teaching the next generation about why it's a great country. And of course, we had some coffee in there because everything is better with coffee. I'm just saying. As I take my sip of coffee, you probably noticed the cake here. We have been talking about our nation's 250th anniversary is coming up next year, 2026. In case you've been living under a rock and you didn't know that, we're just pointing it out. But what we're saying here on this show is like, before we actually cut the cake, let's go back and really look at what's been happening in this great country and why do we have this great country. So if you've seen some of the other episodes, we've just been talking about the blessings of here at Thanksgiving. We'd celebrate the amazing blessings that we have. So that's what we've been doing. And I've mentioned this before, but here's a really good book, 1776. If you're not familiar with the American Revolution, 83% of Americans don't understand why we fought the American Revolution. But this is a great book, and I'm just giving it a plug, not that I have anything to do with it. It was an award-winning book. But you would think that Hollywood would be talking about this book or actually make this series next year for our nation's 250th anniversary. But look, we got crickets, nothing, zero, absolutely nothing. I don't know why. They've actually, HBO, go look this up. HBO has had the film rights for 20 years. 20 years. How long does it take to get their act together? 20 years. I don't know. But anyway, hey, forget that book for now. You know, it's a good book. I highly recommend it. But if you want to go get a book, there's really an awesome God book. It's the book that I wrote. It's about my ancestor from the American Revolution. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. But if you've been watching, we actually said, look, here in December, the month of December, we just want to unravel 30 God stories, 30 stories. So look, December, we got 30 days. So every day we're just going to release another story, another incredible God story. I'm going to kind of do this chronologically. So I mean, I understand a lot of people don't understand the American Revolution. I literally was at a business meeting I don't know, it was about 10 or so years ago with a lady, and this lady, highly educated, master's degree, highly paid in America. And she said, hold on, wait, is the American Revolution before or after the Civil War? She literally didn't know when the American Revolution was fought. Master's degree, six-figure salary lady asking me, when was the American Revolution? I'm like, don't we celebrate July 4th every year in this country? Right? You know what I mean? Like, what is going on? How? Look, so I understand. If you're tuning in and you're like, I don't know, when was the American Revolution? I get it. Look, I've had those conversations with highly educated people. So you're not the only one. That's why we're here. So look, today we're talking about the very first miracle that I'm just going to unpack for you. And let me just start it with this. I like putting things into terms of football because I like football. I don't know about you, if you like watching football, but look, think about this. If we were to put a Pop Warner team up against an NFL team, what would that look like? Look, in case you're not a football watcher, look, Pop Warner is an organization that, they teach our kids how to play football, and they're doing it at like ages 6 years old on hundreds of thousands of kids for almost 100 years, actually. Pop Warner is that old. So for 100 years now, they've been teaching our kids all across the United States how to play American football, not European football, right? Because we know that's different, because they actually play it with their foot. American football, we play with our hand, right? Anyway, all that aside, if we were to put a Pop Warner team, like let's just call it a fifth grade team, fifth grade, okay? So the fifth graders, and they were to go head to head with an NFL team, what would that look like? We know, you and I both know, they would be annihilated on down one, right? I mean, all of the guys, it's just a factual, right? We know that. Like, there's no way in the world a fifth grade team could take on an NFL team. It just is impossible. Like, it's just impossible. But like, we know that, right? Well, that's what we got going on here with the American Revolution. So miracle number one, like God's story number one, I'm going to say it's the farmers. Okay, we're going to call it the farmers. Because that's all we had. The Continental Army was made up of a bunch of farmers and teenagers. My ancestor, Peter Francisco, he was 16 years old. That was not uncommon. There was just a lot of young people, young kids. And they were taking on the world's superpower, the world's strongest army on the planet at the time. The British Army, in case you don't know this, the British Army was so skilled and highly sophisticated. They had the top of the line technology as far as weapons, and they were fighting on all the continents across the world. They were in Africa, they were in South America, they were in Asia. The 7-Year War, again, in case you don't know, we here in the United States, we call that the French and Indian War. But the 7-Year War was going on all over the world. And so the 7-Year War, I mean, you have British soldiers, officers who are learning how to fight against anybody and everybody all over the world. That is who the farmers were going up against. Okay, just put that in perspective. Okay, so let's unpack the British soldiers a little bit more. So here they are, the highly skilled. I mean, these are officers who have been trained, who studied the science of war and how to take them on. Okay, these guys have literally sat there and read all the books and studied what does it take to beat the enemy. That's what they are. Okay, they have the best cannons, the best ammunition. They're well funded. They have way more money than a bunch of ragtag farmers do. Way more. Okay, so that's the British Army, and they're coming here. So this is 1776 again. So let me just put that in context for those of you that are like, I don't even know where we are. I don't even know what time period this is. Okay, 1776. All right, that's what we're talking about. So 1776, we have the British Empire sending their troops. Actually, they came more like 1775. So I'll be unpacking that through this month. But here we have them arriving with the strongest army on the planet. And on top of it, they have a navy. The world's strongest navy on the planet. We have no navy. Like, we don't have navy. We don't even have an army. I mean, let's just be honest. They're just a bunch of farmers and teenagers and a bunch of, and no money, no funding. So in case you didn't know, let me just give you a little history. There's about 2.5 million colonial Americans living here, 1776. About 2.5 million, up and down the East Coast, okay? And think about this. They're farmers, or they're an apprentice, or they own a shop, or something like that. They're a leather maker, or a blacksmith. That's what my ancestor, Peter Francisco, he's a blacksmith. Well, he was also a slave. We'll get to that, okay? But anyway, so you have a ragtag group of guys who are just workers. Like, they just are working. They're not a skilled, trained army at all. Not at all, okay? Nothing. So here they let's just say, like a husband, he said, hey, we're going to fight for our freedom in this country. And I heard about George Washington, and he's saying we need liberty in this country, and I'm going. And his wife probably looks at him like, what do you have, a pitchfork? Like, what are you going to do? Well, I got this gun, the musket, I've been shooting the pigeons and crap and chickens and what, I don't know, whatever they're fighting, fox, whatever they're eating. So I'm just going to take that. Well, look, that is not a gun used. That's not a skilled gun for fighting an army, the world's strongest army. So my point is, they just have your basic run of the mill guns, pitchforks, crap like that up against the world's superpower. And his wife probably looked at him like, well, we got the field to plant like later on here in the springtime. So you better get back, like, when are you coming back? Now, to make things worse, let me just add to it. Put a little icing on top of the cake, okay? To make things worse, in case you didn't know this, it wasn't like the entire all 2.5 million were ready to go fight. No. That was a debate that took place for a while. And even then, what we know is there were a lot of loyalists, or they call them Tories, who wanted to just stay loyal to the king. It was about 20%, roughly, about 500,000 of the colonial Americans. They were like, no, heck no, we didn't fight them. What are you talking about? We needed to stay loyal to the king. Why would we fight them? So you had that going on. Matter of fact, I don't know if you know this, but Benjamin Franklin's own son, he was a staunch loyalist. That created a lot of tension in his family, like estranged. Imagine Thanksgiving with that going on. Well, maybe some of y'all understand how that is, because you get some political differences at Thanksgiving. It always is a challenge. Anyway, that was going on back then. That's nothing new today. That was going on back then. Back then, they still had disagreements on that. And then add to it, you have the British Army that comes over, and it's a known fact that there was raping, there was some sexual assault, and they probably targeted the Patriots, because it was the Patriots against the Loyalists, right? So they probably went after some of the young girls from a family who was a Patriot. So then you had that garbage going on, and that's a known fact. So the dynamics that were going on in this Pop Warner against the NFL, it is crazy to think that we would actually win our independence by 1781. Ridiculous. Actually, 1783 was the Treaty of Paris, but we'll get to that later on. But you have a little Pop Warner football team, let's call them the fifth graders, going up against the NFL team. It is a miracle by God that we have this great country today. So that's miracle number one, or God story number one. Hey, tune in tomorrow, and we'll get to the second God story. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Hit subscribe below, but more than that, click the link below, LUSO.tv. Watch our short film. That's how you can really help us. Together, you and I, together, we can educate 83% of Americans that don't understand why we fought the American Revolution. But I need your help. We need your help. So share it with your friends. Pay it forward. Send it to 1,000 of your friends. Okay, maybe 100, 10 of your friends. Pay it forward. Click the link, LUSO.tv.